A Scientific Notebook. Thomas Henry Huxley's 100 Insights on Critical Thinking in an Age of Unreason. Edited and selected by David Christopher Lane. Narrated by Keith Zering. Introduction. Although Thomas Henry Huxley is most commonly known as Charles Darwin's bulldog, Pitbull today, the fact remains that he was one of the most insightful thinkers to ever write about the nature of science and its methods. Huxley coined the common usage of the word agnostic, as in not or unknowing, in contradistinction to the more commonly used Greek word gnosis, as in knowing or to know. He was an eminently rational man who, though critical of dogmatic religion, believed in the high ethical standards of Judaism and Christianity in terms of how we should treat one another. This small book contains 100 aphorisms from a much larger collection culled by Henrietta A. Huxley at the beginning of the 20th century and published in London, England in 1908. Our hope is that these penetrating thoughts, occasionally koan-like in their import, will serve as guideposts on how to become a better critical thinker in all endeavors, scientific or otherwise. 1. There is no alleviation for the sufferings of mankind except veracity of thought and of action, and the resolute facing of the world as it is, when the garment of make-believe by which pious hands have hidden its uglier features. 2. The improver of natural knowledge absolutely refuses to acknowledge authority as such. For him, skepticism is the highest of duties, blind faith the one unpardonable sin. Thomas Huxley. 3. The man of science has learned to believe in justification not by faith, but by verification. 4. Nothing great in science has ever been done by men, whatever their powers, in whom the divine afflatus of the truth-seeker was wanting. 5. In science, as in art, and, as I believe, in every other sphere of human activity, there may be wisdom in a multitude of counselors, but it is only in one or two of them. 6. Nothing can be more incorrect than the assumption one sometimes meets with, that physics has one method, chemistry another, and biology a third. 7. Anyone who is practically acquainted with scientific work is aware that those who refuse to go beyond fact rarely get as far as fact, and anyone who has studied the history of science knows that almost every great step therein has been made by the anticipation of nature. 8. There are three great products of our time. One of these is that doctrine concerning the constitution of matter, which, for want of a better name, I will call molecular. The second is the doctrine of the conservation of energy. The third is the doctrine of evolution. 9. Comte's philosophy, in practice, might be compendiously described as Catholicism minus Christianity. 10. Fact, I know, and law, I know. But what is this necessity, save an empty shadow of my own mind's throwing? 11. We live in a world which is full of misery and ignorance, and the plain duty of each and all of us is to try and make the little corner he can influence somewhat less miserable and somewhat less ignorant than it was before he entered it. 12. There are some men who are counted great because they represent the actuality of their own age and mirror it as it is. Such a one was Voltaire, of whom it was epigrammatically said, "He expressed everybody's thoughts better than anybody." But there are other men who attain greatness because they embody the potentiality of their own day and magically reflect the future. They express the thoughts which will be everybody's 2 or 3 centuries after them. Such a one was Descartes. 13. Learn what is true in order to do what is right is the summing up of the whole duty of man for all who are unable to satisfy their mental hunger with the east wind of authority. 14. When I say that Descartes consecrated doubt, you must remember that it was that sort of doubt which Goethe has called the active skepticism, whose whole aim is to conquer itself, and not that other sort which is born of flippancy and ignorance, and whose aim is only to perpetuate itself as an excuse for idleness and indifference. 15. What, then, is certain? Why, the fact that the thought, the present consciousness, exists. Our thoughts may be delusive, but they cannot be fictitious. As thoughts, they are real and existent, and the cleverest deceiver cannot make them otherwise. 16. Thought is existence. More than that, so far as we are concerned, existence is thought, all our conceptions of existence being some kind or other of thought. 17. It is because the body is a machine that education is possible. Education is the formation of habits, a superinducing of an artificial organization upon the natural organization of the body, so that acts which at first required a conscious effort eventually became unconscious and mechanical. 18. The only freedom I care about is the freedom to do right. The freedom to do wrong I am ready to part with on the cheapest terms to anyone who will take it of me. 19. There is assuredly no more effectual method of clearing up one's own mind on any subject than by talking it over, so to speak, with men of real power and grasp who have considered it from a totally different point of view. 20. The parallax of time helps us to the true position of a conception as the parallax of space helps us to that of a star. 21. If animals are conscious automata with souls, the soul stands related to the body as the bell of a clock to the works, and the consciousness answers to the sound which the bell gives out when it is struck. 22. Logical consequences are the scarecrows of fools and the beacons of wise men. 23. The only question which any wise man can ask himself, and which any honest man will ask himself, is whether a doctrine is true or false. 24. Of all the senseless babble that I have ever had occasion to read, the demonstrations of these philosophers who undertake to tell us all about the nature of God would be the worst, if they were not surpassed by the still greater absurdities of the philosophers who try to prove that there is no God. 25. That which is to be lamented, I fancy, is not that society should do its utmost to help capacity to ascend from the lower strata to the higher, but that it has no machinery by which to facilitate the descent of incapacity from the higher strata to the lower. 26. Misery is a match that never goes out. 27. Genius as an explosive power beats gunpowder hollow, and if knowledge, which should give that power guidance, is wanting, the chances are not small that the rocket will simply run amok among friends and foes. 28. Thoughtfulness for others, generosity, modesty, and self-respect are the qualities which make a real gentleman or lady, as distinguished from the veneered article which commonly goes by that name. 29. I take it that the good of mankind means the attainment by every man of all the happiness which he can enjoy without diminishing the happiness of his fellow men. 30. Missionaries, whether of philosophy or of religion, rarely make rapid way, unless their preachings fall in with the prepossessions of the multitude of shallow thinkers, or can be made to serve as a stalking horse for the promotion of the practical aims of the still larger multitude, who do not profess to think much, but are quite certain they want a great deal. 31. There is no sea more dangerous than the ocean of practical politics, none in which there is more need of good pilotage and of a single, unfaltering purpose when the waves rise high. 32. The doctrine that all men are, in any sense, or have been at any time, free and equal, is an utterly baseless fiction. 33. For the welfare of society, as for that of individual men, it is surely essential that there should be a statute of limitations in respect of the consequences of wrongdoing. 34. The law of nature is not a command to do or to refrain from doing anything. It contains, in reality, nothing but a statement of that which a given being tends to do under the circumstances of its existence, and which, in the case of a living and sensitive being, it is necessitated to do if it is to escape certain kinds of disability, pain, and ultimate dissolution. 35. Not only does every animal live at the expense of some other animal or plant, but the very plants are at war. The individuals of a species are like the crew of a foundered ship, and none but good swimmers have a chance of reaching the land. 36. When we know that living things are formed of the same elements as the inorganic world, that they act and react upon it, bound by 1,000 ties of natural piety, is it probable, nay, is it possible, that they and they alone should have no order in their seeming disorder, no unity in their seeming multiplicity, should suffer no explanation by the discovery of some central and sublime law of mutual connection? 37. The student of nature wonders the more, and is astonished the less, the more conversant he becomes with her operations. But of all the perennial miracles she offers to his inspection, perhaps the most worthy of admiration is the development of a plant or of an animal from its embryo. 38. Matter and force are the two names of the one artist who fashions the living as well as the lifeless. 39. There is not throughout nature a law of wider application than this, that a body impelled by two forces takes the direction of their resultant. 40. Orthodoxy is the bourbon of the world of thought. It learns not, neither can it forget. 41. Who shall number the patient and earnest seekers after truth from the days of Galileo until now, whose lives have been embittered and their good name blasted by the mistaken zeal of bibliolaters? Who shall count the host of weaker men whose sense of truth has been destroyed in the effort to harmonize impossibilities, whose life has been wasted in the attempt to force the generous new wine of science into the old bottles of Judaism, compelled by the outery of the same strong party? 42. When astronomy was young, the morning stars sang together for joy, and the planets were guided in their courses by celestial hands. Now, the harmony of the stars has resolved itself into gravitation according to the inverse squares of the distances, and the orbits of the planets are deducible from the laws of the forces which allow a schoolboy's stone to break a window. 43. The lightning was the angel of the Lord. But it has pleased Providence in these modern times that science should make it the humble messenger of man, and we know that every flash that shimmers about the horizon on a summer's evening is determined by ascertainable conditions, and that its direction and brightness might, if our knowledge of these were great enough, have been calculated. 44. Why should the souls of philosophers be deeply vexed? The majesty of fact is on their side, and the elemental forces of nature are working for them. Not a star comes to the meridian at its calculated time, but testifies to the justice of their methods. Their beliefs are one with the falling rain and with the growing corn. By doubt they are established, and open inquiry is their bosom friend. 45. Harmonious order governing eternally continuous progress. The web and woof of matter and force interweaving by slow decrees without a broken thread, that veil which lies between us and the infinite, that universe which alone we know or can know. Such is the picture which science draws of the world, and in proportion as any part of that picture is in unison with the rest, so may we feel sure that it is rightly painted. 46. Mix salt and sand, and it shall puzzle the wisest of men with his mere natural appliances to separate all the grains of sand from all the grains of salt. But a shower of rain will effect the same object in 10 minutes. 47. Ecclesiasticism in science is only unfaithfulness to truth. 48. If the blind acceptance of authority appears to him in its true colors as mere private judgment in excelsis, and if he have the courage to stand alone, face to face with the abyss of the eternal and unknowable, let him be content once for all, not only to renounce the good things promised by infallibility, but even to bear the bad things which it prophesies, content to follow reason and fact in singleness and honesty of purpose, wherever they may lead, in the sure faith that a hell of honest men will, to him, be more endurable than a paradise full of angelic shams. 49. History warns us that it is the customary fate of new truths to begin as heresies and to end as superstitions. 50. The struggle for existence holds as much in the intellectual as in the physical world. A theory is a species of thinking, and its right to exist is coextensive with its power of resisting extinction by its rivals. 51. The scientific spirit is of more value than its products, and irrationally held truths may be more harmful than reasoned errors. 52. Every belief is the product of two factors. The first is the state of the mind to which the evidence in favor of that belief is presented, and the second is the logical cogency of the evidence itself. 53. Science commits suicide when it adopts a creed. 54. The method of scientific investigation is nothing but the expression of the necessary mode of working of the human mind. It is simply the mode in which all phenomena are reasoned about, rendered precise and exact. 55. Science is, I believe, nothing but trained and organized common sense, differing from the latter only as a veteran may differ from a raw recruit, and its methods differ from those of common sense only so far as the guardsman's cut and thrust differ from the manner in which a savage wields his club. 56. The vast results obtained by science are won by no mystical faculties, by no mental processes, other than those which are practiced by every one of us in the humblest and meanest affairs of life. A detective policeman discovers a burglar from the marks made by his shoe, by a mental process identical with that by which Cuvier restored the extinct animals of the Montmartre from the fragments of their bones. 57. To a person uninstructed in natural history, his country or seaside stroll is a walk through a gallery filled with wonderful works of art, 9/10 of which have their faces turned to the wall. Teach him something of natural history, and you place in his hands a catalogue of those which are worth turning around. Surely our innocent pleasures are not so abundant in this life that we can afford to despise this or any other source of them. We should fear being banished for our neglect to that limbo where the great Florentine tells us are those who, during this life, wept when they might be joyful. 58. No slavery can be abolished without a double emancipation, and the master will benefit by freedom more than the freed man. 59. Education is the instruction of the intellect in the laws of nature, under which name I include not merely things and their forces, but men and then ways, and the fashioning of the affections and of the will into an earnest and loving desire to move in harmony with those laws. 60. Those who take honors in nature's university, who learn the laws which govern men and things and obey them, are the really great and successful men in this world. The great mass of mankind are the pole, who pick up just enough to get through without much discredit. Those who won't learn it all are plucked, and then you can't come up again. Nature's pluck means extermination. 61. Ignorance is visited as sharply as willful disobedience. Incapacity meets with the same punishment as crime. Nature's discipline is not even a word and a blow, and the blow first, but the blow without the word. It is left to you to find out why your ears are boxed. 62. All artificial education ought to be an anticipation of natural education. 63. The only medicine for suffering, crime, and all the other woes of mankind is wisdom. 64. The only good that I can see in the demonstration of the truth of spiritualism is to furnish an additional argument against suicide. Better live a crossing sweeper than die and be made to talk twaddle by a medium hired at a guinea séance. 65. No man ever understands Shakespeare until he is old, though the youngest may admire him, the reason being that he satisfies the artistic instinct of the youngest and harmonizes with the ripest and richest experience of the oldest. 66. Many of the faults and mistakes of the ancient philosophers are traceable to the fact that they knew no language but their own, and were often led into confusing the symbol with the thought which it embodied. 67. Books are the money of literature, but only the counters of science. 68. There is but one right, and the possibilities of wrong are infinite. 69. It is given to a few to add to the store of knowledge, to strike new springs of thought, or to shape new forms of beauty. But so sure as it is that men live not by bread but by ideas, so sure is it that the future of the world lies in the hands of those who are able to carry the interpretation of nature a step further than their predecessors. 70. Whatever practical people may say, this world is, after all, absolutely governed by ideas, and very often by the wildest and most hypothetical ideas. It is a matter of the very greatest importance that our theories of things, and even of things that seem a long way apart from our daily lives, should be as far as possible true, and as far as possible removed from error. 71. All truth, in the long run, is only common sense clarified. 72. You may read any quantity of books, and you may be almost as ignorant as you were at starting, if you don't have, at the back of your minds, the change for words in definite images which can only be acquired through the operation of your observing faculties on the phenomena of nature. 73. The saying that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing is, to my mind, a very dangerous adage. If knowledge is real and genuine, I do not believe that it is other than a very valuable possession, however infinitesimal its quantity may be. Indeed, if a little knowledge is dangerous, where is the man who has so much as to be out of danger? 74. Patience and tenacity of purpose are worth more than twice their weight of cleverness. 75. The body is a machine of the nature of an army. Of this army, each cell is a soldier, an organ a brigade, the central nervous system, headquarters and field telegraph, the alimentary and circulatory system, the commissariat. Losses are made good by recruits born in camp, and the life of the individual is a campaign, conducted successfully for a number of years. but with certain defeat in the long run. 76. My belief is that no human being and no society composed of human beings ever did or ever will come to much unless their conduct was governed and guided by the love of some ethical ideal. 77. Perhaps the most valuable result of all education is the ability to make yourself do the thing you have to do when it ought to be done, whether you like it or not. It is the first lesson that ought to be learned, and however early a man's training begins, it is probably the last lesson that he learns thoroughly. 78. The great end of life is not knowledge, but action. What men need is as much knowledge as they can assimilate and organize into a basis for action. Give them more, and it may become injurious. One knows people who are as heavy and stupid from undigested learning as others are from overfullness of meat and drink. 79. There is no mode of exercising the faculty of observation and the faculty of accurate reproduction of that which is observed, no discipline which so readily tests error in these matters, as drawing properly taught. And by that I do not mean artistic drawing, I mean figuring natural objects. I do not wish to exaggerate, but I declare to you that, in my judgment, the child who has been taught to make an accurate elevation, plan and section of a pint pot has had an admirable training in accuracy of eye and hand. 80. Accuracy is the foundation of everything else. 81. Anybody who knows his business in science can make anything subservient to that purpose. You know it was said of Dean Swift that he could write an admirable poem upon a broomstick, and the man who has a real knowledge of science can make the commonest object in the world subservient to an introduction to the principles and greater truths of natural knowledge. 82. My experience of this world is that things left to themselves don't get right. 83. The scientific imagination always restrains itself within the limits of probability. 84. It is a law of nature, verifiable by everyday experience, that our already formed convictions, our strong desires, our intent occupation with particular ideas, modify our mental operations to a most marvelous extent, and produce enduring changes in the direction and in the intensity of our intellectual and moral activities. 85. Men can intoxicate themselves with ideas as effectually as with alcohol or with bang, and produce, by dint of intense thinking, mental conditions hardly distinguishable from monomania. 86. Demoniac possession is mythical, but the faculty of being possessed more or less completely by an idea is probably the fundamental condition of what is called genius, whether it show itself in the saint, the artist, or the man of science. One calls it faith, another calls it inspiration, a third calls it insight. But the intending of the mind, to borrow Newton's well-known phrase, the concentration of all the rays of intellectual energy on some one point until it glows and colors the whole cast of thought with its peculiar light, is common to all. 87. Whatever happens, science may bide her time in patience and in confidence. 88. The only people, scientific or other who never make mistakes are those who do nothing. 89. The most considerable difference I note among men is not in their readiness to fall into error, but in their readiness to acknowledge these inevitable lapses. 90. To quarrel with the uncertainty that besets us in intellectual affairs would be about as reasonable as to object to live one's life with due thought for the morrow, because no man can be sure he will be alive an hour hence. 91. I verily believe that the great good which has been effected in the world by Christianity has been largely counteracted by the pestilent doctrine on which all the churches have insisted, that honest disbelief in their more or less astonishing creeds is a moral offense, indeed a sin of the deepest dye, deserving and involving the same future retribution as murder and robbery. If we could only see, in one view, the torrents of hypocrisy and cruelty, the lies, the slaughter, the violations of every obligation of humanity, which have flowed from this source along the course of the history of Christian nations, our worst imaginations of hell would pale beside the vision. 92. Agnosticism, in fact, is not a creed, but a method, the essence of which lies in the rigorous application of a single principle. That principle is of great antiquity. It is as old as Socrates, as old as the writer who said, "Try all things, hold fast by that which is good." It is the foundation of the Reformation, which simply illustrated the axiom that every man should be able to give a reason for the faith that is in him. It is the great principle of Descartes. It is the fundamental axiom of modern science. 93. Positively, the principle may be expressed, in matters of the intellect, follow your reason as far as it will take you, without regard to any other consideration. And negatively, in matters of the intellect, do not pretend that the conclusions are certain which are not demonstrated or demonstrable. That I take to be the agnostic faith, which if a man keep whole and undefiled, he shall not be ashamed to look the universe in the face, whatever the future may have in store for him. 94. The best men of the best epochs are simply those who make the fewest blunders and commit the fewest sins. 95. That one should rejoice in the good man, forgive the bad man, and pity and help all men to the best of one's ability is surely indisputable. It is the glory of Judaism and of Christianity to have proclaimed this truth, through all their aberrations. But the worship of a God who needs forgiveness and help, and deserves pity every hour of his existence, is no better than that of any other voluntarily selected fetish. The Emperor Julian's project was hopeful in comparison with the prospects of the Comtist anthropolatry. 96. Faith, said this unconscious plagiarist of Tertullian, is the power of saying you believe things which are incredible. 97. The science, the art, the jurisprudence, the chief political and social theories of the modern world have grown out of those of Greece and Rome, not by favor of, but in the teeth of, the fundamental teachings of early Christianity, to which science, art, and any serious occupation with the things of this world were alike despicable. 98. The first recorded judicial murder of a scientific thinker was compassed and effected not by a despot nor by priests, but was brought about by eloquent demagogues, to whom, of all men, thorough searchings of the intellect are most dangerous and therefore most hateful. 99. Platonic philosophy is probably the grandest example of the unscientific use of the imagination extant, and it would be hard to estimate the amount of detriment to clear thinking effected, directly and indirectly, by the theory of ideas on the one hand, and by the unfortunate doctrine of the baseness of matter on the other. 100. In truth, the laboratory is the forecourt of the temple of philosophy, and whoso has not offered sacrifices and undergone purification there has little chance of admission into the sanctuary.